organization. We're so excited to have Mary Morris, CEO of Virginia 529, speaking today. This session is particularly important to me as part of Virginia 529's PR team. We worked closely with Mary over the past few years to help communicate her vision to the media. So I'm very excited to see Mary speak today in a different format. And I hope you guys all enjoy it as well. So first, we wanted to share a little bit about the Boardroom since we have some new faces. The Boardroom is a volunteer-run organization focused on advancing women to higher levels of leadership. So we provide free access to C-suite leaders throughout the United States through webinars and on-demand content, which you can see on our YouTube. We welcome anyone at any level in their career, from students to people just starting out in their careers to retirees in various industries, from education, nonprofit, government, corporate, and entrepreneurs. The best way to follow us is to go to our website, www.totheboardroom.com, or follow us on LinkedIn, which Jen has already dropped in the chat if you want to follow that while we're talking as well. We just launched last September, and we could not be more excited for the support we've received and the women we are impacting as we move forward. So as Jen mentioned, a few housekeeping things. Please keep yourself muted during the presentation since we'll be recording this and we want to hear Mary loud and clear. We will also save about 15 minutes at the end of the session for Q&A with Mary. So please feel free to jot your questions in the chat as we go through, and we'll ask them on your behalf as we move forward. So without further ado, we are introducing Mary Morris, CEO of Virginia 529. Mary has an amazing background and resume with 30 plus years of experience as a private lawyer and as a public servant, having served as treasurer of Virginia and Virginia Senior Assistant Attorney General for Tax and Finance. And today, as CEO of Virginia 529, she oversees several programs under the Virginia 529 umbrella, including Invest 529, one of the largest education savings programs in the country, Able Now, a savings program for individuals with disabilities, the SOAR program, which is focused on increasing and improving accessibility in Virginia, and Retire Path Virginia, which is Virginia's new state-facilitated retirement savings program, which will officially launch this summer. So as you can see, Mary has a lot on her plate, and we're so grateful that she took the time to talk to the Boardroom today. So thank you, Mary, and I will pass it over to you.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. It's so nice to be with you and everybody that's on the call. I look forward to your questions after I take a stroll down memory lane, I guess, and talk a little bit about my path and my background, how I came to be where I am, which I will tell you, I've had, I think now the two best jobs in Virginia state government. When I was state treasurer back about a little over 20 years ago, I used to tell people that was the best job in state government. I loved doing that until I came to this one. And this one truly is the best job in state government. It aligns everything that I've cared about and have been passionate about for my entire career, and it really pulls it all together. So I can step back on that. You know, they've asked different questions and asked me to address things, and I've not done something like this. I am a talker, so I'll be able to talk for the full time and hopefully not bore you to tears, and talk a little bit about how I came up and how I looked at careers. And I would tell you it was not particularly thoughtful or planned. So you don't have to have a great plan, I guess, for starters, although it's good to do that. I always knew an education was important, and that's a through line in my entire life. So that was just a given for me. And I grew up at a time when that maybe wasn't necessarily for girls. I don't mind saying it. I'm going to be 69 next month. So, I grew up in the 60s and 70s when I was going to school, graduated from high school in 72. So it was a turbulent time in the country. More and more women were obviously taking different roles, but I was in that transitional time, I guess. But I had a really supportive family, but they were not overly involved. So, as I've seen how that changes, I think parents are so much more involved in their kids' lives. I think my husband and I were in ours than my parents were. It was more benign neglect, perhaps not neglect. That's the wrong word, but just do your thing. You can do anything. They were very supportive. but I really sought it out. But it was just always a given that I was going to go on to college, and not a given that I would go on to law school. I'm not sure what interested me in the law, except I'm pretty logical, I guess. I like to think things through. I like to think I'm a problem solver. I like talking. I worked for my dad when I was, oh gosh, I've always worked. That's one thing. I think that's important. If you like to work and work a lot, that's helpful. I started working for my dad, who was a heating and air conditioning contractor, and when I was 14, and I saw myself as running his office. I'm not sure if he saw it that way, but I felt like I was. I did correspondence and answered calls and did takeoffs on jobs. I didn't know what I was talking about, but I was working and around him and in around a business environment. And so I enjoyed that. And I think as I got older and when I thought about what I would do after I graduated from college with a government degree, which doesn't necessarily prepare you to do much of anything, I also was certified to teach. So I had thought, well, maybe I'll teach. Again, education is a through line for me. So I had taught, and I have in my lifetime, everything from preschoolers for a year after I graduated from college and before I went back to law school. I taught at a country day school up outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, for a year, and I love that. I love little kids. I love to see how people learn, no matter what age they are. When I was getting prepared before I graduated, I did some student teaching in an elementary school and a middle school. Did my student teaching in a high school. When I was in law school, I taught legal research and writing to law students, so I had that experience. And ultimately, I did teach in college. I taught at James Madison University for several years when I was also practicing law. So I've covered the gambit from pre-K all the way through law school, and I love it. I love teaching. So again, that piece of it, I love education. I like to be a student. I like to teach, and I like to think I've done that over the years in different ways. I've been an adjunct a couple of times in my professional career as I've gone through. So that's a piece of it, and so again, I went through school. No one really motivated me. I'm self-motivated. I think that maybe is pretty important. You have to know who you are and what drives you. And I like to do things. I like to be a sort of problem solver. My family would probably say too much. I always have one of the standing jokes in my family is you always have a better way to do everything, don't you, mom? And it's like, well, yeah. And whether that's how they should organize how people stand online in a grocery store and make the lines move better, or how we can fix the access to education, it's a little bit the same. I think my brain's just always working about how could we do that a little bit differently? How might I help you? And again, with my kids, I'm always offering suggestions. Well, you could try this, or you could try that, whatever they want to do, and I will do that with people who work with me and for me. Well, let's try this. There's always a different way, and if one thing doesn't work, you try something else. So that's maybe a through line in my life, the way I approach my career, the way I approach family, or the way I approach everything else. You don't ever accept defeat. You just go on. You try something. If this doesn't work, if someone doesn't listen to you, if your message isn't received, try it again. Find a different way to communicate. Always look at the person you're trying to communicate with and find what works for them, what resonates, and be able to communicate that through. So that's been a piece of it. So, self-starter, kind of looking at opportunities, had interesting experiences in school. I always worked when I was in school. So again, there's that work ethic, I guess, is just in there. I like working. Um, I can tend to continue working for some time into the future. Um, if when I retire from here, that'll come somewhere down the road, but it's not in the near view mirror right now. But I think I want to do something different. I always like a new challenge. I always like learning something new. I think that's always important. Always be willing to change and adapt. I was a Girl Scout leader a number of years ago for my kids, and one of the things I tried to instill in those young girls, same thing I do with the folks that work at Virginia 529, which is to be adaptable. We're life has always changed. The world has always been changing, but the pace of it certainly has picked up in the time that I've been an adult. And if you're not willing to go with the flow, but also to change and to adapt, I think you're just going to be left behind. And I've always felt that way. You don't take something new coming around the corner as a negative, but as a positive. It's like, this is a new opportunity, some new way we can look at a problem, some new approach that we can take. And being open to that, again, to me, always being open to education is a really important part of that. That's sort of how I got started. Then went into law school, which again, no one in my family had been in law, hadn't really thought about it. I still resonated towards the business side. It's like my dad's a small businessman and there's no one really helping him. So I really thought that's what I would work on. And initially it was. I went through law school. The classes that I really liked tended to be the tax classes and some of that type, the ones that regulations and things like that. And I can remember talking to one of my tax professors at my third year in law school, and I said, I don't have an accounting background. I didn't get a business degree. I don't really have even a math background, but I really liked the tax classes that I took. And there was a program for a Master's of Law and Taxation at William and Mary where I went to law school. I said, "Am I kidding myself? Do you think I can do this?" And I really respected him. He's a great professor, really tough. I'd done well in his class, and so I knew I could do just basic federal income tax. And he really encouraged me. So that was one of the questions that was asked that I addressed when I looked into this was how important is a mentor? I haven't had a lot of strong mentors, I would say. I think that's a problem. The time that I was coming up, women tend to maybe not have always been great mentors. I think that's changing a lot. I think more women in my position are willing to give back and are willing to help younger women coming up. I'm not sure that was necessarily the case when I was starting out and when I was just coming out of law school and in my first years of practice. But I did have some folks who helped me along, and John Donaldson was one, a professor at William and Mary, tax professor, who encouraged me to get my ML&T, and I did, and that really set me on a path for the early years of my professional life. I've been in and out of the public and private sector, so if you have questions about that, or you're thinking about making changes or what you're doing, I certainly have some perspectives on that. I like both. What I found worked best for me was being in the public sector, not having specific clients or worrying so much about billable hours or all of that, but being able to really just focus on what my mission was, what my job was, and getting the work done. But I love the private practice of law. I did that for my first 10 years after coming out of law school and getting my ML&T. I did that right away after I finished law school. So I went to Harrisonburg, Virginia, in the Valley of Virginia. So a good middle-sized city, I guess, in Virginia, and practiced with a couple of different law firms doing tax law mostly, some employment law work, but generally tax law, and really enjoyed it. Learned a lot, sort of cut my teeth. I think that's important to have that experience of knowing I didn't really know much of anything. Again, I had the senior partner in the law firm. Um, was an older gentleman at the time, someone who had come up. He actually read the law, but he was brilliant. I think he always had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, though, because he didn't go to law school, but he was really, really bright. And I think I was the first woman in that law firm. I was one of a very small handful of women practicing law in Harrisonburg at the time. And again, from a personality perspective or suggestions for anybody coming up, sort of don't think about it too much. It just never occurred to me that I wouldn't be accepted. Didn't occur to me that I couldn't do the work. Didn't Doesn't always occur to me to ask for permission for things. I was probably at that law firm for a year before I realized that almost everybody else, attorneys much more senior than me, would draft letters for the signature of the senior partner that I worked with, and I worked pretty closely with him. He really took me under his wing, so that was another mentor that I had. And I never had him sign them. I was signing the letters as a first year associate. If I was communicating with the client, I was communicating with the client. And he never told me to not to do it that way. So I sent the letters. And really, I would just notice when I would be in his office talking that people would come in and have him sign letters. And it was just a realization. It's like, huh, I guess that's one way to do it. It just never occurred to me to do that. I wanted to stand on my feet and to take my work product and put it out there and always be willing to learn. And if it was wrong, I would get input, but it would be my work. So we went along from there, had a couple of different experiences. I started teaching also. So I had an opportunity. Actually, honestly, I think they reached out to my husband, who was the assistant Commonwealth's attorney at the time. That's really what took us to Harrisonburg. So he was really inculcated into the community. And they'd used, I think, some of the folks from there to teach different classes. They had a need as the semester began for someone to teach legal research and writing, which I had taught when I was in law school. And actually reached out to my husband, somebody from the university, I do not remember now, that's lost to the memory banks, to see if he'd be interested in teaching that class. And he said, well, no, but I think you might want to talk to my wife because she actually has some experience in doing this and it fits more in what she does. And so that's how I got started teaching at James Madison University as an adjunct for a number of years. I had an opportunity when I had my first child to transition into a full-time position there. So I actually did teach, and that was my first foray into working in the public sector, working for a public university in Virginia. I was a full-time tenure track professor. I got off that track, clearly. It pained me when I did it, but it made sense for my career development. But for a number of years, I taught, I practiced law part-time while I was teaching full time at JMU. And so that was a nice opportunity, again, to try different things, to multitask, which I think I've always been a big multitasker, and most women I think are, not to be stereotyping or anything like that. But I think by and large, in my life experience, women can juggle more than one thing, and they're pretty good at it, and having multiple jobs and doing that. But it gave me a different perspective. Let me tap into education, which again is just so important to me. I love that, just working with students, thinking about that. They had a legal assistant program, and so I was teaching classes I taught legal research and writing, as well as federal income tax, civil procedure. A lot of those students also worked as interns in a law practice that I had, so I got to work with them in that perspective, and I think helped. Did help mentors a lot of young women and young men who wanted to go on to law school. They got their legal assistant certificate from JMU and then went on to law school. So I've been able to follow a number of them. And so, but I had an opportunity later on to go back into the full-time practice of law in a larger law firm, and that's what moved me to Richmond, Virginia. Went with a large firm, was then McGuire Woods, Battle and Booth, doing tax work. And so I was back into what my specialty was, which I'd moved away from a little bit in my earlier practice and in teaching. And they really kind of pushed me in more into estate planning and estate and gift planning. And what I found there was that really was not where my heart was. And so I did not stay there very long. And there were some opportunities to do other types of tax work, which I liked, and working with businesses. But I really realized what they needed was someone who was going to do trust and estates work. And that was just not going to be my thing for my entire career. I honestly just thought, I can't do this. I could not envision that being my career. And so was started looking for some other opportunities. And that's when I had a chance to move back into the public sector. There came an opening in the Attorney General's office in Virginia for someone who had my particular specialty. I had spent some time with a different law firm in Harrisonburg doing not just tax work, but bond work. Bond work is a very specialized kind of practice. It is not for the faint of heart. It is very detail oriented. It's just kind of a special thing. It is a form of tax law, I always thought. And the firm I was in Harrisonburg, the tax lawyers also did the bond work. In most bigger law firms, you only do tax work or you do bond work. So not too many people have both of those specialties. And I had been developing that over the 10 years that I was in Harrisonburg, because I actually went back into full-time practice in Harrisonburg and then ended up moving to Richmond. I have to remember what my career was. Um, and so when it came time to leave McGuire Woods and to do something different in the Attorney General's office, they were looking for someone who could do tax work and bond work. And I just ultimately fit the bill. It took a while to get there. There was a transition, a change in administrations. So got to see that. I've never liked the political side. I'm more of a policy person. But you also have to understand the politics if you're going to work in state government, which I have for, as it's turned out now, most of my career. I spent about 6 years in the Attorney General's office as a senior assistant I loved it. Loved that kind of practice. Again, I wasn't worrying about billable hours. I was just doing the work. And so that resonated for me. And so a lot of, I think, building your career is knowing what works for you and what doesn't. Um, so I don't forget it. I don't know really where to weave it into this story, but what I would say to any of you, and I don't know, who you are or where you are in your journeys, you have to find in work, you either, there are two important things: who you work with and the work that you're doing. And I have always said, you have to really love at least one of those. You have to really like the people that you're working with, feel committed, feel safe with them, feel like you're in it together. Or you have to really, really like the work. You have to know that that's your passion, that you're committed to it. If you don't have either one of those, you just need to go. If you only have one of them, you can make it work. If the people are great and the work is, it's okay, well, then you can do that at least for a while. Or if you really love the work and the people, you're just not, you don't jive with them, you're very different, whatever, you can make that work for a long time too, because you can kind of ignore it. What I've had for the last 15 years, which is the ideal, is to have both. If you can have a group of people that you really enjoy working with, that share a shared vision, um, and you love the work, then you've hit the jackpot, and you can stay there for a long time. You can be successful, and you can be happy, and you can really feel like you're doing something. And for me, it really has been about making a difference. I don't know if that even sounds trite or whatever, or not real. It's like, oh, well, everyone wants to make a difference. It really is true, and it's true when we do surveys of the employees here at Virginia 529. We have about 100, just over 140 employees here, and we do surveys every year just to gauge how happy are people, how engaged are they, what can we do to make this a better place to work. And mission is a huge piece of it. People tend to work in the public sector, they tend to work for state government, they work at Virginia 529 because we feel like we're giving back, like we're really doing something, we're making a difference. And you can absolutely do that in the private sector. When I was doing bond work, I felt like I was making a difference too. That's always been important to me. If I was helping the local school system get Virginia Public School Authority bonds issued and do it right, they were going to build schools, which is going to help educate their student body. If I was helping build a sewage treatment plant, well, you need that. So I was making a difference because I was allowing something to happen. When I was doing domestic work, which I did not like as a lawyer, and I did a little bit of it for a short time in Harrisonburg, I still felt like I was making a difference. I was helping people go through perhaps the worst time of their life. So I think it's really important to connect to the work that you're doing, to find the why of it. Why is it important? Why does it resonate? Why is it good for you? But I also knew that was not something I was going to spend my entire career doing. That wasn't the best use of my time. I don't think that was where I was making the most impact. So I've had that ability to go in and out. I don't know if anybody's keeping track or scorecard on it. I moved around a fair amount. So I always tell young people when I have a chance to talk to them, don't worry too much about what you want to be when you grow up. I feel like I actually have finally found that in the last 15 years. But before that, there were opportunities. I was always willing to try something new, and not to say, "Oh, I've made this is my path. I can't change it." No, you can always change your path. That's a big part of our message at Virginia 529 now, with families or with anybody with education. I think everybody in the country should have a 529 account, because you never know when you're going to need it. You never know when you're going to need to retrain, to go back for a new degree, for a certificate, to learn some new skill that will prepare you for the next phase of your life. I haven't gone back since I got my MLT, except I have taught at different times. And so that's put me back into a classroom, made me prepare lesson plans. I do a lot of speaking, I do a fair number of engagements. So that's a type of education. You have to get ready for it and be prepared, and be in a classroom setting, which I've always loved. Just always liked it. Not everyone does, but I do. So that's worked for me. So I spent my time, in the AG's office, and I learned a lot. Um, I left at a time I just felt like there were different things that I could do. Compensation was a factor, and there was a change of administration, and really not a lot of attention being paid to development of the attorneys at that particular point in time. So I made a change. I went back into the private sector. For a number of years, I was doing just plain bond work mostly, and some tax work. So again, staying with my field, but there's still a draw to the public sector. One of the things I had done when I was in the Attorney General's office was help start what is now Virginia 529. We were the Virginia Higher Education Tuition Trust Fund when we first came into being in 1996 when I was in the AG's office, and they were my client. So there was another female attorney in the office that I worked with very closely. She got hired away pretty quickly to actually work for Virginia 529. So she and I continued to work for a number of years together, and we helped create the original prepaid program that we just closed it a couple of years ago to reopen a different form of program here in Virginia. So I've been with this organization from the very beginning, even though I've only been working for it directly for the last 15 years. Um, so we did that, and I sort of stayed involved, and I really like that. I stayed involved with the people, and I'd also worked with the Treasury Department very closely when I was in the Attorney General's office. They were one of my clients. So I did all the tax litigation. That was the first time in my life I'd really done litigation. That is not what I'm cut out for, at least at the trial level. And I had to do some of those. But really, I ended up in the AG's office taking 6 cases to the Virginia Supreme Court, which was a wonderful experience that I never would have had if I hadn't worked in the public sector for the Attorney General's office. I was not a litigator. I was not an appellate lawyer. But I just got thrown into it because I was doing the bond work. But remember, I said they needed a tax and bond lawyer. Not too many had that. So I was doing tax litigation and the bond issuances for the Commonwealth of Virginia. So all the finance agencies were my clients, and I just got a wonderful spectrum of experiences. So I would say to anybody, look for new experiences, always try something new, always put yourself out there. One of the things I did in the AG's office, and I just did it, and I will say that to all of you, sometimes just ask for forgiveness rather than permission. You just never know. I was really interested in the legislative process. I knew statutory law. From my tax background, my brain just kind of works that way. I can read and write legislation, regulations, and all of that. I wanted to see the process more. And so we always had to sign off on legislation that impacted the tax department, for example. And I'd read it all and I'd make comments and we'd send it through this whole process. I thought, well, I need to see what's going to happen in the General Assembly. And so I just started going to all the committee meetings. I just went. General Assembly in Virginia is in session usually 2 or 3 months of the year, January to March of every year. And I just kind of blocked those times off. And I would go to the Senate Finance Committee meetings every Monday and Wednesday and just listen to the whole roster. And I would see how people presented to those committees. I would watch whether it was the state treasurer or any individual who was coming up and presenting their case to the committees, hoping that their legislation would go through. And it was great because at that point, no one knew who I was. I could sit in the background and just listen. No one in the General Assembly was asking me questions or saying, Ms. Morris, what do you think? By the end of it, they actually did. Every once in a while, I would have to speak to a bill that the tax department was interested in, either in quashing or in getting through. And so over time, I had the opportunity to address the General Assembly occasionally, which has turned out to be a really good thing in the job I'm in now. I do it all the time, and I have done that for some time. And so having that background, again, you just never know. Didn't think that that job would lead to the next. Didn't have it in my head that I would be in the job I'm in now. Um, didn't think I would be state treasurer at that point and have the opportunity there, but it happened to come out that way. So I was back in the private sector for a few years. And an opportunity came up. I worked for Treasury. I knew the folks there. I knew the person's name is Ron Tillett. He was the Secretary of Finance. He's been back in the private sector for quite a long time with Raymond James, but he was a mentor. He was someone who gave me an assist, right? Because I reached out to him, the person who had been the state treasurer at the beginning of a new administration. The Gilmore administration was asked to become the executive director of the Virginia Housing Development Authority, kind of similar to what I'm doing now. There are several independent agencies. It actually wasn't even that, it was an authority, but it's sort of an independent agency of the Commonwealth with a board and an executive director. So you're part of state government, but a little bit removed, a little bit more autonomy, quasi, sort of a mix between government and business, if you will. So when she left, there was an opening, obviously. And I called Ron to say, I'd really be interested. This seems like a really great job. Um, I'd be interested in it. Like, I didn't know if it was wired. I didn't really think I had any shot at it. I'd never been very political. So it was in Virginia, it's a political appointment, but they also want people who have the background. And Ron said, I think you'd be great. I think it would be terrific. He had liked me as his lawyer because he was the state treasurer when I was in the AG's office. And I tended to be a lawyer for them that didn't always say no because I'd had a private sector experience and working with clients as a lawyer. I was a problem solver. Again, remember I said that in the beginning. I like to solve problems. It's like, well, let's see how we can make this work. You want to do this, and someone's telling you that you can't. Let's try to figure out how to get around that, how to make it work. And so we would do that and we would work collaboratively. And he liked that I didn't always tell him no. And so he I think, put in a good word for me and I was appointed state treasurer. Honestly, it surprised me. I think it probably surprised a whole lot of other people, particularly those who were interested in being state treasurer and wondered how I had gotten that wonderful job. But it worked. And again, I had never at that point run anything. I had had assistants that worked for me when I was practicing law. Law firms are very non-hierarchical places, not always even the best, just not a lot of organization, not a lines of chains of command. You've got associates, and you've got partners, and you've got administrative staff, and that was about it back then. And so I was coming into a place where 100 people would work for me. And I had in the AG's office, maybe 3 or 4 people reported to me, but I wasn't really their supervising boss. They just report to me as a senior assistant. So it was very intimidating. It was a very different kind of experience. Now, again, my personality is that I think I can do pretty much anything. So I was intimidated, but I got this. I mean, I knew them. I knew the people because they'd been my client. So I actually did know something about the organization. I didn't know about leading them. I didn't know a whole lot about the budgeting process and personnel issues. And, we do check in the Treasury Department. You issue checks for all like paychecks for all state employees. And back then we were printing out actual checks. Actually, while I was there, it was part of the transition to doing direct deposit. But we were sending out and all the problems that can happen with sending out checks for people was became my job. So it was great. Like I said, for a long time, I thought it was the best job in state government. I loved every minute of it. It was exciting. I got to sort of, if those of you who know Hamilton, often in the room where it was happening. Like I was privy to some things that were happening in state government, and I liked that. I was a little bit, and I was enough removed that I still wasn't really political. That office, fortunately, is really about policy, about issuing bonds for the Commonwealth, about managing those bonds, doing the check processing, doing unclaimed property. It's a pretty big office in Virginia with a number of different tasks. We did the insurance for the Commonwealth within that office. Again, it gave me opportunity to interact with the members of the General Assembly. We worked on legislation, so just a lot of opportunities that I loved. But it was a political appointment. So that job ended after a single term because it was a change of administration. It was a change in party. And although they said, thank you very much, we understand you did a really nice job, but the governor has somebody who would really like that position. And that person worked for him very hard to get him elected. So thank you very much for your service, but would you please clean your desk out over the weekend? And if you'd help them out and, be available, that'd be really nice as this new person comes in. Judy Wagner, who was lovely. We ended up becoming friends. I really didn't want to because I'd really loved that job, and I'd really hoped that maybe they'd keep me on. That does happen sometimes, particularly in the finance jobs, because a new governor coming in doesn't want to mess that up. Um, the state treasurer, the controller, the head of the Department of Planning and Budget, all the finance agencies are really important to keeping state government working. But they made the change. She was lovely. We became friends over the years, and she ended up moving on to become Secretary of Finance. So there are a lot of there's a history. Maybe I digress, and yeah, I'm just talking into the void, and I'm coming up on time for y'all to ask questions, and I haven't even gotten to where I am today. But that can be a little bit of a shorter story. Women in finance in Virginia is kind of a big thing. There have been any number of female treasurers, state treasurers. Susan Dewey is still the head of VHDA. She and I are good friends. There have only been two people in the position that I'm in. The other one was a woman, Diana Cantor. She was here for 11 years, and I've been here for 15. So there have only been two of us leading this wonderful organization. So there's that kind of it's a small world in Virginia state government, and have had the good fortune to work with a lot of really talented, smart women, particularly in these finance arenas. I was back out doing private sector work, doing securities litigation for about 6 years, which gave me some background in all kinds of investments, which was really helpful. And then when Diana was leaving, she knew she was going to leave. She asked if I would be interested in applying for this position now 15 years ago, and I was, and I got it, and we sort of moved on from there. And from this point, like I said, this has been just the best job possible because we manage a lot of other people's money. We are about retail. We are about helping families plan and save for education, for disability savings, and for retirement. Our newest mission, we're able to do a lot with access and affordability for all Virginians. We are putting a tremendous amount of resources right now into helping those who have been underserved, underrepresented across the Commonwealth, helping them with pathways to education. We work with junior achievement. We work with a lot of different programs, particularly with middle school and high school students, so they can see the dream and they can think about how important education can be to that, whether it's a certificate program, a training program, community college, four-year university, just getting them on pathways. So it's that you don't have to know where you're going. You don't have to know what your career is going to look like. Don't need to know where you're going to be 20 or 30 or 40 years from now. It will evolve. If you are open to possibilities, if you are open to new experiences, if you're adaptable, you look for opportunities, you jump at them when they're given to you. I think all things are possible. I have been blessed to have a really just a tremendous career that I didn't plan ever. Didn't know what was going to happen. Did not have this grand plan of, oh, this is what my life is going to look like. I'm going to have this job and that job. Didn't have a clue. Each time I moved, it made sense. It was for something new and different, a better position maybe, or sometimes it was just a different position. I never thought I'd be anywhere for 15 years. I will finish my career here if they'll have me. I mean, I'm not done yet. We're just opening up this retirement program. So again, you can always learn something new. I'm just so excited about what that's looking like, how we can help. I'll give you the punchline. 45% of Virginians, and this is true across the country, don't have access to retirement savings in the workplace. And if they don't have it there, they probably aren't going to be saving for retirement. So that's why we're creating this program. We have the potential to help millions of people in Virginia over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years plan for a better future. And that mission, that ability to help people see what the possibilities are, plan for their future, and give them the tools to do it, and to do that well, and to provide the programs that allow it, has just been a dream. It's a dream job. I love it. Public sector, I love. Private sector's fine. For me, really working in the public sector has been what resonates, and that ability to connect with people. And we've been very successful. So we're proud of that. We're the largest 529 program in the country for many reasons. But I think a part of that is just that commitment. So I think I'm about it where you wanted me to quit. Like I said,
Yes.
I'll keep talking for the next 3 hours if you let me, but please let me know if there are questions, and what I can answer.
Yes, this was amazing, Mary. I mean, your story is just so phenomenal. And I think, that people, as you touched on, have this idea that like they have to have everything so planned out. And I think what your story, at least for me, resonated is that, just being open to these possibilities is what's really important. So I'm going to kind of kick off the questions. Please, participants, put questions in the chat that you have for Mary. But Mary, I know you have a family, right? You have two daughters, correct? So
I
tell
did.
us how you raised your two daughters while taking on these really powerful roles in the state and in the private sector as well.
Yeah. Um, they always saw it. So we've just made it work. My husband was always supportive, so that's really key, and I had that. Having a spouse helps. It can be done other ways, I'm sure. But I was fortunate, and I know that. I was always blessed. I had positions where, and the ability to have nannies, so that helped. I was able to have someone come to my home and let my kids kind of stay in their environment. That was huge. I know not everyone has that, and I see that all the time. And we try to be very family friendly here at Virginia 529. That's one of those things, that you learn as you go along. I know the privilege that I had from my education, from my experience, but we try to make it easy. And, it's just like if you have a family thing, then that's it. Family has to come first. And that was always important for me. I don't know how my kids would tell it, but, I looked at it. We would always tag team. I was lucky. My kids were rarely sick, so I didn't have to deal with that too much. But if they were, either their dad or I were home. And some days it would be like, okay, my morning's clear, so I've got the morning, but can you spell me in the afternoon? And we would just tag team it. So you make that work. I think for me, what gave was friendships, probably. So I'll just say that I don't have that strong group of friends, female friends. And I'm at a point in my life now where I really kind of wish I'd been able to keep that up better. But that was what I think what was a give for me because I was always really vested in working, and my family now still teases me. It's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. All you care about is Virginia 529. That's all I talk about. I talk about it a lot at home and with my family. I mean, it just kind of is who I and that's no one made me be that way. That's just how I am. But family time was important. So rarely traveled, didn't go places with friends. Weekends, evenings were for family and whatever time I had. And my oldest daughter, she was really easy. She was one. I did different things. I did always have done some community service as well. I can remember things like I chaired for a while the community services board in Harrisonburg when I was there, which is a mental health facilities, sort of community care things, and we'd have meetings and sometimes, if dad wasn't home or he had something also because he was called out as the assistant Commonwealth's attorney, I would bring her and I would bring her when she would be like 2. But I don't know if you can see the space back here. And I had a pad, like she had her space, and I would put it behind the desk if I was chairing this meeting. And she would have books, and thank God she always liked to read. She is a writer now. She's beautiful, wonderful young adult, and a few things to play with. And she would just stay there and quietly play, and I would do the meeting, and then we would finish. And so was that a little bit unorthodox? And again, I didn't ask anybody if it was okay if I did that. We just did it and it worked. And now I knew I could count on her to be good. That was just the kid she was. Her younger sister, that wouldn't have worked so well. But I didn't have to do it at that point. We did different things. So, some of that's just knowing your kids. But yeah, so you make it work. But I think probably friendships, that sort of personal time away from. I always had close. Again, I like the people I worked with, so we had relationships there. I feel like I go out to lunch with or call on, but folks to just talk on I'm not a big phone talker anyway, talker that I am. So that was probably it. It was really kind of work and family. So I'm not sure it was the best balance, but it was what we had and what made it work.
Mhm. Great. I'm gonna ask, Beth had a question. She said she was very impressed by the number of rule changes that you made, and she heard the word mentor a couple times in your presentation. She's asking, how important is it to have a mentor as, to grow as a leader? And what are some of the steps to build that type of relationship?
Yeah, I think it's important, and I will say we have in the last several years here at Virginia 529, as we've gotten big enough to do it really, we have a mentor program. It's there's a lot to matching up, so we've grown now at about 140 people. We have enough people who can be mentors and mentees sort of across divisions. And so we're putting a lot of effort into that because I think sometimes it's hard. You don't know how to seek somebody out or how to make that work. And so we really um, thoughtfully put time and effort into a mentorship program here at Virginia 529 to match folks up. Someone that they can just talk to, go out to dinner with or lunch with periodically, and really talk about their goals and how they deal with people, how they deal with communications issues or challenges. For me, it was never very formal. Um, I will say, and this is what I think I've tried to give back and be a mentor to other young women because I really didn't have it. So I will just tell you, where I
Mhm.
came through in the 70s and early 80s, women just weren't very good at it. They just weren't, at least not in my experience or in the areas that I was working in. Again, a few of these friendships that I had, some of the women who were also in similar positions as my visibility, I guess, or the positions I was in progressed. But in those earlier years, and again, when I was working in a law firm, it was mostly men. So I didn't have even the women in the workplace, but I had several of them who were very supportive. And some of us that didn't treat me differently. I mean, they would help me learn things. So it wasn't a formal mentoring program, and we really weren't talking about my goals or my dreams or my aspirations, but they were helpful when I needed them, right? So just that support from Ron Tillett to say, yeah, I think you'd be great. And I know he put in a good word with the governor. I think he said, hey, I've worked with her before. I think she'd be good in this role. Well, that was what I needed, right? That gave me the opportunity, and I had to fill the bill. The same thing I think happened when I came in here, and that was one with Diana. She said it wasn't so much of a mentor, but she remembered me. Like we'd stayed in touch. That was one relationship that I had kept because we both had Virginia 529 in common. We both really cared about it. And so when she was ready to move on to the next phase of her career, she wanted someone that she trusted to take over her baby. And fortunately, she thought that was me. And so she encouraged me to apply for the job. And so we worked through it that way. And I think she let the board know that she thought that I would be a pretty good pick. And so when they selected me, that gave me that opportunity. So for me, it's been at critical junctures, I think, in my path. There have been people there. And so for me, it was just being open, building relationships, never burn a bridge, I will say that. And I have left some places. I've never left a place poorly, I guess. Never stormed off. And I've had times when I was not very happy when I was practicing law in Harrisonburg. And I won't go. It's way too long of a story, but there were some things that I wasn't that happy about. Let's say with how they handled something. I made that known, and I even thought about quitting. It's like this is not okay. But instead, I sort of stuck it out. They actually made it right, with a partnership offer. It was at the time of judging partnership, and the way it was handled by a couple of members, and it really fractured that law firm as it turned out over several years after that. But I waited, and then they made that offer, and then I said, "Thank you, but no, this is when I need to leave." And so I did it on my terms, but it was still cordial, and I maintained relationships with many of those folks for many years afterwards. So no matter what's happening, if it's at all possible, don't burn bridges. You just never know when someone that you've worked with, someone you've interacted with will come back into your life. And I have had that happen many times. Again, I didn't know I'd be back in state government. I did not see the position I'm in now as a possibility when I was working with a New York based law firm that did securities litigation for 6 years. That just sort of fell into me because of past relationships. And then the folks that made the appointments, again, was some of that was based on past relationships. They'd seen my work, people who knew what I had done, they knew how I behaved, they knew how I could work with the General Assembly, let's say, they knew how I could work with other people. All of that redounded to my benefit. So you're making an impression on people, whether they're your mentor or not, whether you think you are or not. So always keep that in mind. Keep your cool when you can. You don't let yeah, I have that reaction sometimes if something happens, and I don't have a great poker face, but I've learned to be better to not react. If you get a comment from somebody that just sets you off, or you want to put them in their place or whatever, the better part is just to kind of calm yourself and then respond in a different way. So for me, it's things like that. It's that impression you're making on people that you don't even realize you're making.
So, great answer, Mary, in terms of mentors. Look at everybody as a potential mentor, right? Because you don't know where you're going to need them and when you're going to need them.
Right.
So Pam shared that she loved your story, and she's asking, how have you used transferable skills to be successful? So you were in so many different roles, and I know law and tax was a baseline for that, but what were those transferable skills that you grew that you took from job to job to job?
Well, I mean, I would say, eh, having a law degree has been just amazing for my entire career. I use it every day still. So, I passed the line. I've spent more of my career not practicing law than I practiced, and that passed, I don't know, several years ago, because I've been in and out in different ways. But the skills I learned in law school, the skills I learned as a lawyer, are invaluable. So if anybody's ever if you're thinking about law school, absolutely recommend it. Don't, the private practice of law for me was not my favorite part of practice. I like the AG's office, but you use it. You use it in negotiating skills. For me, it's learning how to problem solve. It's learning how to take a problem apart, how to find answers, how to look at a problem from different perspectives. Right? If you can't do that, you can't really be effective in anything that I'm doing. If I'm trying to convince um, my board of something, or trying to tell a story, or we're trying to get legislation through the General Assembly, or a new initiative, or I'm doing outreach for families, it's all about telling a story, seeing both sides of an issue, and being able to kind of develop a through line for it. So my legal background has been invaluable. I'm sure my general counsel thinks that I still practice law too much. It's like, well, what's the contract say? Or, I review all of our big contracts and have to sign off on them. So knowing that I can, um, you know, pay attention to what everyone else is telling me, use outside counsel sometimes, but I can also evaluate it myself. And so that's been really, really helpful. And then just education, being open, being a learner. To me is the best thing in the world. I love to read. You have to read a lot in law school. I'm a constant reader, and in the job that I have, I mean, with the internet now, and I'm having been looking at it, but my tablet beside me all the time. I mean, the first thing in the morning, I read, I don't even know how many news sources. So, being aware of what's going on in the world, just getting your information from lots of different sources, that's going to be even more important with AI, being able to discern. I think the law helped me with that, how to separate out what's, truth from fact. Um, what's the ruling from dicta, and just really being open to lots of sources. So I read constantly. I read, everything: the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, New Yorker, Washington Post. I mean, all of them. I get feeds, different types, Virginia business feeds, all of that. So that skill set, those things, being able to read, to synthesize quickly. I think one of the best things, and something you can practice, is getting it quickly, right? I can take an executive summary of pretty much anything, and I could do, I could talk to a reporter about it. I could talk to the General Assembly. I could take that information and not know anything else, and be credible, to talk about a topic, or to support it. And also know, if I got a question I couldn't answer, to always be willing to say that. So that's extremely important, whether it's business, the law, whatever. If you're talking to somebody, if you don't know the answer, then don't make it up. Just say, I just don't know, but I will get the answer to you. And make sure that you follow up and get them the answer. And that's a part of being for me, being a lawyer as well. You've got to be straight with people. You've got to have that core of integrity, honesty. All of that flows through. And in a financial setting, I mean, those are transferable skills, right? If people don't have your trust, then you've got nothing. So you just have to maintain the highest standards of integrity and honesty, and know that people can trust you. Because if you lose that, so and I've told my kids from the time they were little, it's like, you can do all kinds of things. You can make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. You just have to own it. And I hope that when I make a mistake, I own it. I know in this organization, if something goes wrong, I'm the one they look to. I'm the one that's at fault. And everyone has to be willing to take that. You have to be willing to take risks. You have to be willing to take the consequences. And I think in a professional setting, if you want to move up, if you want to be in a C-suite position, you just have to be willing to do that. You cannot be but so risk averse. You have to be willing to risk and reward, and say, what's the risk? How big is it? And am I willing to take responsibility for it? And if you are, then you do it. And if you can't do that, if you just can't do it, then you need to find something else to do, I think. Because that's always going to happen. And be willing to say, I don't know, I'll find out. Great question. But also be able to go through. Oh, that really answered your question, but
I know Becca has one last question, then we're going to wrap up here because we're really close on time. Go
Yes.
ahead, Becca.
So Mary, I'm curious if you've ever had an aha moment where you really felt like, wow, this is my passion. This is why I'm doing what I do. And if you could leave anyone who's still searching for that aha moment, like some words of wisdom.
Oh, we do. I get them sometimes, and there are several of them, and it's been in our disability space, and it's been in our education space, and I could probably tear up now. But when we get letters or calls from families, and we had one most recently with something we did with our disability program with Able Now, and we just did a promotion, and people sent us their stories or whatever, and had socks that had been made by a person with a disability, and what a mom wrote was, and it was for saving. That was it. If they opened up the account, we gave them something, and it was like, I've never gotten a reward. I'll tear up now. For doing the right thing, for trying to help my child, and for saving. And it's like that resonates when people say, thank you for providing us this opportunity. My child went through school, and they made it, and they did it without debt. And we had ones during the recession back in 08 and 09 where families, they were losing their jobs, and they would write to us and tell us, but my kid got to go to school still because we had our 529 account. I mean, those are the things, and it's not just one. Uh, That's why I love this job, right? We get it all the time. We get cranky people that aren't happy with us sometimes, sure, but we get a lot. I mean, we know I get to resonate. Get to go to events and have people come up and say, "Thank you," all the time. It's like, that's great. You're making a difference. We know that we help people, fulfill their dreams. Our tagline is Dream, Save, Achieve at Virginia 529. Help people find the dream. So our access programs are helping people that don't even see it, don't see education, don't see a future as a possibility. We help them dream, we help them through, we help them to save, we help them find ways to make it work so that they can achieve. What could be better? I mean, I have the best job. I have the best job. I love it. I've loved it for 15 years, and I will love it until I finish up, and I'll love it after that. So
I
I've
love
been
it.
blessed.
Amazing.
Wonderful, wonderful question to end on, and wonderful advice, Mary. Thank you so much. I know we have some comments in the chat that everyone just really enjoyed this discussion. Quick update on the boardroom. Jen Osborne placed a link that's a quick evaluation, literally 5 questions. If you have like 1 minute to kind of answer those questions from the participants to really help us with our programming as we move forward, that will help us. But again, Mary, thank you so much. And especially on behalf of this whole group, this has been very beneficial for all of us.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been fun. This is a different kind of a chance to talk for me. So thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye bye.